And away we go. Hello there. Don't know what we're going to be talking about this week. I almost forgot to do this. But I've been keeping myself to a schedule of getting a video out on Friday, so I'm going to try and stay with that. I've been concentrating on rewriting as I try and figure out what happens next with My Soul to Keep and The Fast Fading Light. Just regular Imagineering. The notebooks are well at hand, so I can grab them when I'm ready to get back to them. But in the meantime, I'm picking up a yet another unfinished project. Originally, it was titled Half a Life, and then Mated Souls, and now its current title is To See Beyond the Veil. It's another EGS story set in 2191, I want to say. And it concerns Division 2, like Raven and Stranger. This one involves a courier, Special Agent Deborah McNally. We pick up on her when she's on a delivery. She realizes she's being followed, and then she gets called back to the Division 2 headquarters in Orlando, Florida. And so she has to get rid of the tail and change aliases and change disguises as she heads back. And once she gets back there, she's accused of crime she didn't commit. Has to extricate herself from the situation, and finds out that it's all an elaborate ruse to get to the information that she was carrying. Because like all EarthGov security couriers, she's as a mnemonic courier. They have what's known as courier operating modes, which essentially makes them into human digital recorders, if you will. So I've been concentrating on that, trying to get that back on track, so I can continue moving forward. I like to have multiple projects going on so that I can move from one to another in case I get stuck on one, I can move on to the next. And sometimes I'll just switch from one to the other just to keep my mind fresh. Like I said, I really didn't have anything planned to talk about, although I did want to say a few things about writing advice. Because there are some people out there who are well-intentioned, but they seem to think that because they have had some success in publishing and writing and making some sales, that they can dictate to everyone how to write, and that kind of annoys me, because every single person does it differently. What works for one may not work for another. I have been told multiple times that there is no way that I can write the way I do, because I don't like the term, I'm what's known as a pantser. I don't make plot outlines. I start with a scene, start writing, and see where it goes. I mean, the most I'll do is maybe a scene in advance. And even that there's a good chance that it's not going to go exactly as I originally plotted it. It's mostly just pages of notes. This happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And like I said, there's a chance that I'll follow it, and there's also a very good chance that I won't, because I'm always turning the plot over in my head, trying to find the best way to get to that end point. And sometimes it's a straight line, sometimes it kind of swerves a little bit. And that's the one thing that I want to get. I want anybody watching this to remember. Listen to writing advice to a point. When somebody tells you things like, well, don't use a lot of adverbs. Yeah, it's a good idea. Adverbs are 99% of the time unnecessary. Sometimes you need them. You can't go completely without them. Same thing with adjectives, but don't go crazy with them. Don't fall in love with them. Don't use passive voice and things like that. Those are all good structural bits of advice that you can use. Then there are other ones that I shake my head at when I hear them. One that I really shake my head at is I read somewhere about a literary professor who he never wanted to see. He wanted exclamation points never used, which kind of seems odd to me because I don't see, if I just see a sentence with a period at the end, I'm going to assume, well, the person's just saying this in a regular tone of voice, and that really wouldn't make sense if you want to say, hey, look out, there's a guy with a machete coming up behind you. It really doesn't carry the same emotional punch as, hey, look out! Doesn't carry the same punch. So, need that exclamation point. And there's also this movement called "said is dead," wanting to remove the word the dialogue. Said is an invisible word. Okay, 99% of the time when you're reading, you don't see said. You know it's there. You go right by it because it's invisible. It's just saying, okay, this person said this. This dialogue is coming out of this person's mouth. So you don't see it. 99% most of the time I do use said. There are a couple that I alternate with when I want to evoke a specific way of speaking. Like if someone was whispering like this, I will say they whispered. Or if somebody's muttering under the breath, like, oh no, yeah, that's absolutely great, you stupid son of a bitch, suck my dick, muttering under your breath. So I'll use those two. Or I'll say so and so called out or asked. That's the other one that I use. So I generally use those four, but most of the time I use said, because most of the time said is the best one for it. I've also had people tell me don't include the internal thoughts. The internal dialogues we all have with each other. Don't include the character's thoughts. Why not? I use an omniscient third-person narrator, so that narrator can logically hear what's going on in every character's head. And I do set them off by italics, having them in italics. Italics without quotations. Now, if you're reading something of mine and you see something in italics and there's quotation marks around it, and it's in English, then it's characters communicating in a non-standard way. I do this when people are communicating telepathically, or in, like Brianna and the Three, I have an artificial intelligence known as Parsifal that's linked to Brianna's brain, and sometimes they communicate electronically. There's a neural link that's embedded in Brianna's brain. And I use that, put that in italics also, because that, again, is essentially non-standard communication. Then there are things that anybody would say, yes, should be in italics, like title of major works, movies, television shows, novels, things like that. Those are in italics. Ship names are italicized also. I also use them when I want to have something in a foreign language. At several points, for example, in Upon a Far Distant Shore, Artemis speaks in other languages. She knows English, Chinese, Japanese, Russian, French, 6 languages. She grew up speaking Chinese and English. Then after she joined, after the incident, and she joined Section Alpha, she then learned Japanese, Greek, Russian, and French. And whenever I have somebody speaking another language, that goes into italics also, just to indicate, okay, this is something else. So you may not agree with me. You may never want to include a character's thoughts. That's great. Works best for you is what you should do. Then there are other things. Now we're starting to get into some touchy subjects. There are editors out there who will critique your manuscript, checking on structure. How is your sentence structure? Is the story paced okay? Does it kind of lag in the middle, like a lot of stories do? Are your characters consistent throughout, or if they do change, does the change make sense? Can you see them moving from one point to another? And is all that logical? Does the plot line sound good? That's great. And then there are editors who focus completely on plot and things like dialogue, and make sure your dialogue sounds good. Those are all great. Those are all great. You don't need it. It's not 100% necessary. Actually, it is. You should have. Would be a good idea to have a professional edit if you can afford it. The president and founder of Smashwords once said in a podcast that you should never go broke doing this. You should never go broke self-publishing. Your outlay should never outweigh your income. Is it a good idea to have a professional editor? Yeah, if you can afford it. I can't afford it. So that's why I edit so many times. That's why I go through so many editing passes, just trying to get the stories as perfect as I possibly can. And believe me, it's sometimes even after they're published, I have to go back and correct something. I think with Eyes Open, I had to resubmit multiple times because I kept finding mistakes. And let me just say now, if anybody watching this should... And I forgot to turn off the notifications. Oh, give me one moment here. Okay. Oh well. Sorry. Where was I? Oh yeah. Is it a good idea to have a professional edit? Yes, it is. Unfortunately, they do get expensive. So be very scrupulous about your editing until you get to the point where you can't afford it. And when you can't afford it, use it. Same thing with cover artists. I make my own covers. I think I make some pretty good covers. But a professional could probably do it better. Again, I make my own covers until I get to the point where I can afford to have somebody make my covers. There is, however, now we get touchy. There is, however, one kind of editor that I can unequivocally say, as of right now, I will never use. And that is a sensitivity editor. For those of you who don't know, a sensitivity editor will go through your manuscript and make sure you're not offending anybody. Because why would you? Now, my biggest problem with that is couple things. Firstly, this is 2019, and somebody is offended by something every minute of every day. Every single day. Somebody is offended by something. Second of all, it borders on censorship. Telling somebody, hey, you should rewrite this section, the dialogue's weak, the plot is kind of dragging a little bit, character shows up at the beginning, doesn't do anything, does he really have to be there? Things like that. That's fine. You probably shouldn't write this line of dialogue. You might offend somebody. Tough. I will never use a sensitivity editor. I don't care. You can tell me I am the worst person on the face of the planet, but then again, I'm a middle-aged white guy, and according to the left, I am evil. Excuse me. Sorry. It borders to me on censorship. You are not going to tell me what to write. You're going to tell me how to make what I write better, but you're not going to tell me what to write. And I can unequivocally say right now, if somebody reads one of my books and something in there somehow, in some way, shape, or form offends you, put it down, walk away. Because I can promise you this, if you come at me, I will come back at you twice as hard. You will not tell me what to write. I will write what I want to write, how I want to write it. You are not going to tell me what to write. I don't care if some beta male somewhere is offended by the fact that I have a guy who might be in a higher position of power than a woman. Sorry, it happens. Okay. Getting sidetracks again. I'm sorry. I sometimes get angry because I'm sorry. This is the United States. We have the freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want. I'm not going to soften what I say and what I write just to satisfy some anonymous person who's never going to be satisfied, because they never are. People who are endlessly offended by one thing after another are never going to be happy. It's never going to be good enough. They want 1984 to happen. And it's kind of strange. It was always joked that it would be the right that did it. It's going to be the left that does it. And I'm sorry. Didn't want to get into politics there. I'm sorry. I generally don't talk about politics because my politics generally run counter to everybody. Because as far as I'm concerned, the greatest threat this country faces have D's and R's after their names. And we keep electing them every 2 to 4 years. So. Sorry guys, I did not mean to get angry like that. So, I'm going to keep this short because I've got a lot of things on my mind right now, and I'm sorry I'm not really into this, but I did want to make sure I get one video out. I've got a little bit of a streak going, and I'd like to keep it that way. I keep forgetting to turn off notifications, and I'm sorry. So, so that's it. That's it for this week. Like I said, a little shorter. I'll have a link down at the bottom for the books. If you're new here and you like what you see, click the submission button, click the little bell. I generally try and do a video every Friday, sometimes on Saturday. I just didn't want to wait until tomorrow this week. If you do buy one of the books, please Go back and put up a review, good, bad, or indifferent. It all helps. And remember, we are each of us the heroes of our own stories and the villains of someone else's. Thanks, guys. Bye.